What's up, everybody? It's Thursday.
Right.
That means it's art fight night. It's art fight afternoon, I guess I should say. Practically art fight evening here. Brian, last week we had our 99th episode. That's a big number. Technically, if you want to be technical, I think some people might call us out and say this is the 100th episode. But according to art fight time on the art fight calendar, our 100th episode will be next week. This is 99.5, okay? This is episode 99.5, our episode 100 preview, as you can see up there on the screen right now. We want to talk a little bit about a couple of different things today. We're going to talk a little bit about art. We're going to talk about whether topical art is a treasure or a trap. We're also going to talk about an upcoming fight between Benson Henderson and Michael Chandler. I rewatched their first fight today. Fantastic. It's got me excited, although a little trepidatious about the upcoming bout. And we're also going to review a little bit and tell you about what we have coming up next week. We've got this brand new format here. We're hoping we get some people in the chat. We can bring your questions up. So listen in, comment, interact, and let's rock and roll. Let's have a great show, Brian.
Joe, what an introduction. Can't wait. You ready to do it?
I should have shaved, but let's go.
All right.
Maybe I'll shave while you're running the intro.
All right, here we go.
Okay, everybody. Great to have you here. This is a brand new format for us. I don't know how much of this is obvious on your end, dear listeners, dear viewers, but on our end, it's a brave new world, frankly. I mean, it's our second big upgrade since we started the quarantine. Is that true?
Yeah. So, for a lot of people, you may still only be an audio listener because that's what we've mostly done for the last 2.5+ years. But we did start, in March, April, getting into some video. And of course, when you're learning something new, Joe, the thing to do is to make it as complicated as possible and then try to do as many different things as possible. Mm-hmm. So I did that with our setup, and that was great. And then I decided to simplify a little bit. So this setup, while a little bit more sort of maybe a little bit more homogenous in some ways, and less weird and fun in that way, man, this thing works and it's awesome. So it's been a really cool change to make for me because anybody that does this kind of thing, it's hard when you're running all of the machines and you're doing all the business while also trying to be meaningfully in a conversation. So,
right.
That's my final plea for any sympathy or concern.
It's like that whole myth of quote unquote multitasking, which just means you're failing at everything you're trying to do at the same time. Sort of like I'm trying to do right now. I'm like realizing I've just got, you can never take too much time to sort of get your clutter cleaned up before you start something important like a podcast. So I'm trying to do
good time to clean. It's good kind of.
It's a great time to clean.
Yeah. No, but I'm super excited though about the new setup is very much geared towards sort of audience participation, right? Or making it easier for us to get guests in here without as much sort of Skype hullabaloo and right. Also being able to have our friends and listeners and viewers starting to actually use the chat, so that we can pull your comments.
Tell people about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you just whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you are, all the chats come in to us, and we will show them on the screen if they're a good question or an interesting comment or suggestion.
I was looking at it just a minute ago while the show was just getting ready to start up. I was on the Twitter account, and I was retweeting the Twitter account and giving a little bit of juice, just a little juice before we got going. And but you're saying like if I was on Twitter right now, listening / watching the show live, I could chat somehow through Twitter and we would see it here.
Yes, sort of. Without getting too technical, there's sort of Twitter / Periscope. So Periscope embeds itself inside Twitter. So essentially the feed is running in Twitter. If you want to interact with it, you got to click on it and then you'll be in there. And then, yes, you can do things like type type things at us.
Or on YouTube, you can just comment on YouTube like you would on any video while it's live, and we'll actually see it here.
And that's really the main
answer
thing.
Your questions. Yeah, that's killer.
So that's a new thing that, you know, I don't know how much people are, you know, it's kind of like first day at school, right? Like nobody wants to raise their hand or be first, you know. But we'll get that going. But in the meantime, I'm just super excited to have everything a little bit cleaner and a little bit simpler, and that really, without harping on that too much, that really is in the spirit of our sort of episode 100. We were really thinking about just running a technical test, but we thought, why don't we just make it a reasonable conversation? And we have some things we want to talk about, and that'll allow us also to sort of test at the same time and start getting the word out. And you know, maybe we can do a little bit of a cliffhanger. But I have to say, like, I'm so excited about our actual episode 100 episode and the two mega guests that we're going to have.
How much should we tell our audience about the mega guests? Should we just tell them who they're going to be?
I think that we can tell everyone who it's going to be maybe towards the end, so that if somebody's really interested, maybe they'll stick around. But no, ultimately you
have to wait.
I'll just say
we'll tell
this
you at the end.
Yeah, I'll just say this. You know, like we've really, in our own sort of weird art focused kind of way, really just longed to sort of create some sort of offshoot of like the MMA beat on acid or something, right? And and so I think that what we're coming up with for episode 100 will likely be about as close to the MMA beat on acid as possible, with a lot of credibility and academic sort of rigor as well.
Oh yeah, we got the bona fides, dude.
Yeah, so there's a few. Those are some pretty solid, hints. So if you're followers or listeners of what we're doing and who we've been talking to and what we've been kind of getting into with a lot of folks, you might have an idea. But I'm, you know, man, I want to just tell people right now, but I'm not going to. So anyway, so lead us to the promised land for this episode 100 preview, Joe.
Well, I think it's, you know, I mean, all this tech talk will kind of help us get there, because I feel like there was a time, listeners, you might remember this, but there was a time like when the quarantine first began at the beginning of March, when the podcast just kind of disappeared for a couple of weeks and we just sort of didn't do it. And I think it was, you know, to some degree, I mean, it kind of threw us off for a minute there. Just speaking for myself, me and Brian used to record the podcast over at his office, over at his house. It always involved me going over to the west side of town and us being in the same room. And, you know, those of you who, who were listening back in those days weren't even aware of this, because, again, we weren't really using video in terms of what was going on. A lot of times we'd have conversations with people where we were using video so we could see each other in the talk, but we would just put the show out as audio only. But regardless, our plan was always a plan where we were, together on the west side, doing the podcast. And after the quarantine came in, it just sort of threw things off for a minute. And then at some point, all of a sudden, Brian, gets a hold of me and he's like, "Hey man, I think I figured out how to do this with video." And all of a sudden I realized that, the podcast hasn't been dormant this whole time. Brian's just been, Frankensteining this whole new way to take it to a whole other level. And now this thing brings us to a point where we're sort of doing that, but we're doing it in a more of a sustainable, practical way. But what we came up with is basically a way to make the show better, and it was inspired by the fact that we're all living through this crazy quarantine time. Now, our first subject is about topical art. Okay, so right now we're in a situation where, if you're following the art world, you see a lot of projects right now that are, in one way or another, are responding to life in quarantine. They're responding to the Black Lives Matter movement. Here in Nashville, we've got that going on. We also have art that's responding to the fact that we had a tornado smash our city even before all this stuff happened. So we've had an extra crazy year here in Nashville. I'm in a show right now at Red Arrow Gallery in East Nashville, and that's really the theme of the show, is all three of those things sort of seen more through our local lens. because the Black Lives Matter movement here has its own sort of flavor and frankly, unfortunately, our cities had a share of struggles with the COVID response, mostly because we're a destination for every idiot traveler from everywhere wants to come here and party in the middle of a pandemic, and it's not easy to deal with. And now they're like, today I saw that they decided to get tough. They decided to get tough on that mask mandate, and they arrested a homeless guy who didn't have a mask and also doesn't have a home. So
I know, I saw that, man. It's
like,
just,
that's
wow.
that's not the guy you're supposed to be arresting. But anyway, so like every other city or town or hamlet or village around the country, Nashville has its own spin on these things, and this exhibition I'm involved with is all about that. But when it comes to topical art, I'm talking about art that's very closely related to and talking about something that's happening in the headlines today. And the best example of this for me, just historically in my head, is when you think about the 1960s. You think about the folk music revival that happened then. There were a lot of people, including a young man named Bob Dylan, who wrote songs that were very specifically about the headlines in the newspaper, things that were happening today, and addressing them directly. And one of the reasons why Bob Dylan ended up kind of falling out with that community early on is because he started moving away from that. And I think he did that because he was smart and he moved away from it, because by the time he's writing things like Blowing in the Wind, he's writing a song that at that time could be applied to the Vietnam War, but is still a song that I could sing today because it's just a perennial classic about, anti-war song. So it doesn't matter what the headlines are saying today. It's a song that could have been written in medieval times, practically. So it brings up this subject of whether artists should focus so minutely and so myopically on the specific things that are happening in their times and address them directly, or should artists be concerned with the bigger picture? In our case, we've talked about this over the last several weeks. It feels like the big picture artist in me wants to say, like, you should avoid topical art. But as we've brought up in the show more than once, it also is a time when it feels like nobody has bandwidth for anything but the quarantine we're living under, or the riots and protests that are happening in the streets, I'm still living at my cousin's because my house is getting repaired and I'm having to fight with the insurance company for the last 3 months because of the damn tornado. You know what I'm saying? So what do you think about that, Brian? I think that's been something you've expressed, just that, can I talk about anything else right now, because this seems to be overwhelming everything.
Yeah, so I have a lot of different viewpoints on it, but I think it's important to sort of agree on a context for which you're sort of looking at all this, because I think that there are some avenues or uses for sort of topical art that can bring light to an issue that maybe is not as known as it should be, or it can be something that is some sort of an angry response. But I think where it really wins, if topical art goes well, and we'll go into maybe how it doesn't go well, but if it goes well, either it becomes something lasting, right? In the way that you mentioned, Dylan, but it's if you adapt that to every other medium, right? Because it's something where you have to really deeply think about what is the most effective way to communicate what I'm trying to communicate to another person. And in the opposite, that something like arguing with somebody on social media would be, where you're just sort of digging trenches just deeper. It's like having a car stuck in the mud and you're just revving the gas and giving yourself no hope for getting out. There's that kind of mentality. Or it's something where if it's done the right way, it's almost either a little hidden or a little cryptic or manipulative, right? Like it maybe brings people in and then it reveals something else to them. I think there's just this extra sort of wrinkle of responsibility for the artist generally to make it more convincing or make it more interesting and to try to make it more universal in some way, as opposed to because ultimately people would say topical art is political art, period, right? I mean, some people would say that, but I think that the less it is, at least obviously that, and the more it gets to sort of the essence or like the necessary empathy it's trying to inspire, or like, if it's activating something that we feel is a weaker componentry in humanity that we want to sort of prod at and sort of help along or whatever it is, right? There can be some deeper way of looking at it, but I do think it's a bit of a trap when it's malformed thoughts in a reactionary way over something that you're actually in the middle of. And I think that that's what the pandemic has been uniquely, as opposed to say like the tornado, even though the wake of the aftermath of the tornado is, very protracted, we're still actually in this pandemic thing, and there's still science evolving all the time because that's what science does. And so we have to sort of readjust ourselves all the time. So I find it risky, I would say at best, to sort of plant your foot down on anything right now, because it just changes in a week. It changes in 2 weeks, and it's continually sort of done that. It doesn't mean that there's not tried and true avenues or universal truths in it all somewhere that could be had at any phase of this. But I'm just saying in general, I feel like a lot of people in their practice and in their work have been maybe, and understandably so, like going to instincts that are native to them. I respond to traumatic things through creative work, and that's how I reaffirm, or reassert myself into reality, or whatever, right? As a human being. So I don't know. There's a wide array there, but I do think it can be dangerous, or like deceptively, sort of attractive.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, the one of the points that I think is the the most problematic to me is the fact that so much of what you normally might address in a song or a film or a book or a painting or whatever would be something that you probably understand on a relatively deep level, want to express. You've got, maybe some kind of conceptual framework around what that is and how and then you're trying to figure out how to represent that aesthetically and all this stuff. But the point being is that you've got a tremendous amount of perspective on this thing. And none of us really has any perspective on certain aspects of what's happening right now. You know what I mean? I feel that way. I certainly feel that way about the pandemic. You know what I mean? I feel like for me personally, if there's any like mask shamers out there who are listening to the show, no offense, I'm glad you're listening to the show. But to me, it's like when I see people who are like, don't want to wear a mask and things like that, it's like, I know it can be frustrating. And I know it's, if you're somebody who, feels the opposite, it can be really easy to, feel critical and negative toward that person or whatever. And at the same time, to me, it's like, man, I just get mixed messages all day, every day about every aspect of this thing. And in terms of the science, the health, everything. And like you say, I mean, part of the reason why that's happening is literally, I mean, like if we're really going to double down on the science of this thing, then you are going to deal with exactly what I'm talking about, because the science of this thing is exactly 5 months old, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit older now because, we started in end of last year in Wuhan, you know what I mean? So it's like, but we don't, science is data, and we don't have data. We're gathering data as fast as we can. And we're trying to figure out what the fuck to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also too, I think that our media and certainly our social media lacks nuance on every level.
Oh yeah.
And so people to this day will say, well, why do I have to wear a mask? They told me 4 months ago, don't wear a mask. You don't have to wear a mask. And it's like, well, that's because the other part of that message didn't come through loud and clear enough, which was don't wear a mask because there's not enough masks for what we're going to need for everybody to wear a mask right now. So you don't wear a mask because we need all the masks we can get for sick people and doctors. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we've got our mask revved up, now it could be a good idea for you to wear a mask. Okay. There's actual real science out there that will tell you reasons why wearing a mask when you don't have an illness is not a good idea. That's real too. You know what I mean? So I just feel like that's, that's how much perspective any of us actually has on this. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And so how are you supposed to make a piece of art about it unless you're making a piece of art about confusion?
Right. A masterpiece.
And that's not really topical. Now you found that transcendent angle where now you're Bob Dylan, right? Now you're not talking about this thing. You're just talking about, mixed up confusion and actual Bob Dylan song.
Sounds like something that should be on a marquee. But
exactly.
Well, I guess one of to sort of fold it back into sort of topical art. I mean, I think that I have seen people. I've had some different artists that I've been working with for this grant program where I was just sort of helping refine scopes of work and things, but and with some creative ways of scaling out their projects. But one of them, it's a collective that is based in Poland, and they basically had created these they used to do these tours, but now they had to do them all virtually. And so by what it amounts to now is sort of like, I'm really ramrodding this thing, but they do this really interesting sort of storytelling tours that sort of highlight the Jewish presence in Poland in a way that a lot of people don't understand. And they highlight some of the oddities too, like where it's like, oh, we're 100 miles from Auschwitz and there's all these kitschy pseudo-Jewish restaurants selling stuff that's not even actually Jewish or kosher or whatever. But anyway, so like it was a really interesting thing, but they utilized this tour to sort of walk people through it. But all the video footage for their tour was shot during lockdown. So it was a really neat sort of, I guess, accidentally nice artifact in a way, because at first I was thinking it's a bummer that this footage is not during sort of like, I'm getting a tour of this city,
this active, vibrant place or whatever.
Yeah. So like, I want to get a sort of sense of the culture and the feel and what it feels like to walk down the street as these kind of videos are presented. And it was just not that at all super stark. But actually in a way it made it
Poland.
Right. But it made it more interesting to sort of reflect on the architecture, and I don't know, it created like a more contemplative thing. So it had this other sort of side effect, another project, that is in sort of the immediate process that can be done right, like relative to the pandemic, what we're talking about, the pandemic. But there was another artist that basically had taken all these collections of written accounts of people's dreams, because everybody's dreams have been so elevated during all this, right? Like people have been having a lot of wild dreams. So so basically she basically would take these dreams that are written out and then she was an artist, so she would work and do visual representations of these dreams or have other artists do it. And it was this whole sort of feed and this whole interesting thing. Like that's something that's more like in the moment kind of dealing with trauma, but in an interesting way. So I think that stuff can be temporally focused in a way that makes sense. But and there can be these nice little sort of afterthoughts of stuff like that. But to go and make something explicitly about sort of, especially something as wide scale as the pandemic, where it's like,
right,
we're not speaking to some unique thing that people aren't suffering from everywhere, so. Right.
Good point. Yeah.
That makes it an interesting twist too.
Yeah, it does. I noticed our friend Nancy Kidder is in the chat. I don't know if you saw that or not. Hi, Nancy. So if you're actually able to stop and watch right now, we're glad to have you on here. I feel like you used the word react earlier too, and I think it's there's also been a lot of specifically political art for the last 4 years, that we had an election in 2016, Brian. It was very contentious. And
I remember.
Yeah, and there's been a ton of art made. I mean, the art world, you don't really, I mean, the music world's reacted a little bit. You've had a little bit of pushback in the music world, I guess you just call it anti-Trump. I haven't really seen a whole lot of people pushing the other wheel, celebrating the other way or something. But you've seen a little bit of it in music, but there's been a lot of it in the visual art world. You've seen lots and lots of, activist type art in the, in the contemporary art front. And I have to tell you, some of it's been okay. There was a cool project in Nashville at a place called the Browsing Room Gallery, where it's hard to describe, but a guy basically did a project like sort of referencing Trump's wall. And it was basically an installation where there was, as I remember it, I'm not going to really do it justice, but there's sort of like a black wall. Then there was like sound. And it was interesting because what it really did was, when you're in there with it, it really just sort of forced your attention like back on yourself, and any given viewer, given their actual thoughts about all the things that were happening at that time, whether they, supported Trump or against Trump, were, voted for the libertarians and, whatever, thinks that we should have, immigration, but only if it's legal and things like this, any number of different points of view. It was a really cool project because at the end of the day, instead of really trying to make some kind of explicit message about his perspective regarding the politics of the situation, it used the stuff of the politics of our situation to affect the viewer with their own ideas about what they were seeing. And I thought that was super bright, super smart. I believe I gave that an award. Actually, just this week, we just turned in our nominations for a bunch of the writers of the Nashville scene turned in our nominations for the best of awards this year. It was really fucking depressing, hard year to come up with best of awards for the arts because it's been such a trying situation for the last several months. But that was an especially effective show that I've seen since the Trump world, came to be. But I've seen, a whole bunch of other shows that were terrible, frankly, in terms of, trying to somehow say something about, Trump's election and just really just sort of falling on their own faces because they were far more clumsy and they were making all the mistakes that we're talking about right now, frankly, as opposed to, finding the way to somehow take the stuff of this that we're all looking at and all familiar with, and then make some kind of a point or create some kind of a conversation that takes it outside of that in some way and takes us to some new place somehow. Does that make sense? And when it's strictly just reactive, it's really, really ineffective art making, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm sure that some people don't even really think about it that much, right? It's just a sort of a knee-jerk sort of thing. But I do love this idea of refraction and confrontation. That's very much obviously, I'm partial to the Rothko Chapel, but one of the things I've always thought most fascinating about that place and those murals that he painted is that I find them at first to be very confrontational because people are like, wow, there's this special building with these paintings. They're just built, purpose-built building for just these paintings. I got to go in and see this. And then they get in and it's just these sort of monoliths that they're just forced to reconcile with. And it is a really powerful way to go about it. It's a more crafty way to get to, I think, to the essence of what's common as opposed to trying to litigate or argue a point. Yeah. But so Nancy from Writing and Fighting here is talking about, she just wanted to point out that Taylor Swift made and released an album. It says in COVID. I'm going to assume that means like
in COVID.
Is that like is that
it looks tuning? Like she's got COVID and she's got it all all capitalized. It's like some kind of like ancient like computer code.
Oh, right. Yeah.
She also did one in BASIC.
Yeah. It does look like that. Nancy is a woman of many tastes and and is highly evolved, and can, look, I mean, I haven't heard the Taylor Swift record yet. What's it called? Folklore. Have you heard about this, Joe?
I have. Yeah. It is, I think it is called Folklore.
I think from what I've heard, it's incredible. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. I'm sure it's not anything that I would necessarily be jumping to listen to, but it doesn't mean I don't appreciate it. But I do have this weird, interesting sort of, I had a thought about sort of Taylor Swift where I was like, it's interesting that she, like, artists now that are on that level, they make records. They're almost like marketing campaigns that have records that accompany them.
Yeah.
As opposed to a record that then is marketed.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's like a media event that happens to have a record in it somewhere.
Yeah. And it used to be like in the old days, it'd be like these artists, I guess, well, no, this is not empirical. I guess a lot of artists, if you look at the classic singers of the 60s, 50s and 60s, you think about like Connie Francis or people like that, they would do a record that would be like, here's me singing all, Latin favorites. Here's my Christmas record. Here's my, sort of patriotic music record, or like they would do these themed kind of things that had a lot of range. By the way, did you know that Connie Francis could speak and sing in 9 languages?
Wow, I did not know that. I love that song, Who's Sorry Now? Did
you
also do Where the Boys Are? That'll just destroy you.
Yes. Her
boys are.
It's so.
Oh my God!
Her
I'm
voice
giving myself goosebumps.
I know, man.
Just
it's
pretending to be Connie.
Right. She's still alive, thank God. But she's had an insane sort of life. Her documented story is unbelievable. Yeah. Somebody needs to do a documentary on her, and I don't know if that'll ever be done or done right.
Yeah.
But anyway. I do think that in a way what Taylor Swift is doing is sort of a throwback to artists of old that would just, it used to be like if you were a metal band, you kind of had to stay in the metal lane, right? Or whatever. Like if you're a pop star now, you can do a million widely different sort of styles and put a different band around you, completely different aesthetic, and make it a thing. And maybe maybe it's a throwback.
I'll tell you what, Taylor Swift is setting our chat room on fire, by the way.
Yeah, I know. This is like
this has turned into all of a sudden it's a Swift. All the Swifties are going to descend into our chat room.
So, Nancy, so for people listening, again, our friend Nancy from Writing and Fighting is saying, now I think it's her best and most personal work. I wonder if it's because she didn't have a marketing campaign. Oh,
snap!
Well, the record didn't just show up on your doorstep, so no. Yeah, and then David Spear here saying it wasn't bad. He wouldn't listen again, though. This is what happens, Joe, when we have a chat. We bring up one thing that actually people give a shit about, and that is Taylor Swift. And now we've got
Taylor Swift.
We've got so David's saying that Phoebe Bridgers' fan group wouldn't stop talking about it, so I listened to it. I didn't turn it off. All right.
I will say, I think there's a song, and I believe this was written by our friend's mom, who there's a song Taylor did called "You Belong with Me," which I think I say this all the time, and I always have to emphasize for people that it is not. I'm not being ironic at all when I say it is one of the great songs of the new century. So there you go. Go listen to that.
Well, good. I mean, hey, look, good songwriting and good artistry and good production. It's hard to be mad at.
Yeah, come on.
It's hard to be mad at. It's just hard. It's just hard to be like if I think about when I'm going to listen to music, there's a lot of things that a lot of people like. You like the Rolling Stones. I like the Rolling Stones. I never choose to put the Rolling Stones on. Mm-hmm. It's happened enough without my intervention.
Right. You get all the Rolling Stones you need just being around.
Yeah, I think so. So it's kind of a weird thing like that. I don't know. So we'll move on from the Taylor Swift though, and I think that I guess we need to turn the corner here.
Yeah,
and I don't
think we really came up with an answer, but I think we kind of were able to say what's wrong and what's dangerous and what's difficult and what you really want to avoid in topical art, and also how you can make art that's meaningful to your time, but at the same time is unique and thoughtful and individuated in some way, and is not just reactive and dumb. Sorry, I had a little bit of bubbly water.
Yeah. Well, Nancy's redeeming herself by turning away from Taylor Swift a little bit, even though, look, we love Taylor Swift, but just to wrap up on sort of the art situation for today. Excited about the potential art scenes post-COVID, right? Roaring 20s
Totally.
brought us Art Deco, Bauhaus. What will the Roaring 20s bring is what the rest of that comment is.
Yeah.
And man, the only thing I'll say is that I hope it's angry, in a way that is constructive, but angry.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that even in the early 2000s, when a lot of stuff was really upside down in the world, it just felt like I was like, "Where's the like?"
Yeah,
where is it? It just I felt like, I don't know. So I hope that there's some scenes that happen that are deconstructive, and maybe a little bit angry.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that happening. I would like to think that could happen again. I would, I also too. I mean, I do think Nancy brings up a good point that when you look at the like she brings up the Roaring 20s and the perfect. It's really a perfect example, and it's a good reminder that right before the 20s we had a worldwide pandemic of the what was it? A swine flu, right? The 1918 flu, and it really took about a year and a half before America kind of got through all of that. If you haven't been like studying up on your 1918 flu pandemic, you really should take a little bit of time to look into it. There's lots of great documentaries that you can just find on YouTube and stuff, but it's really insane how much it looks like exactly like what we're going through now. Like, and it makes me just cringe every time I hear another news person talk about these unprecedented times, Brian, these unprecedented times. And it's like, no, they're literally a repeat of what we did 100 years ago. It's literally the same thing. I mean, fucking literally everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
All the same sort of mini revolts and
everything. It's
all
there. All
by the same players in the same positions.
Yeah. The contradictory science, everything. It's all there. All the mandate here, the hot spot here, nothing happening there. I mean, it's really. I think it's time well spent if you want to it's reassuring, frankly, because you realize that it's like, yeah, that was crazy, and then it was over, you know what I mean? And this too shall pass, But when that passed, we ended up in, like she says, like the Roaring 20s. Like the whole world said, fuck, let's get drunk and like get together and dance and party. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I hope that I
would do exactly that. Whatever
a joyful eruption in the world, and then pair that with a little bit of class war and militancy, and we'll be really killing it.
This sounds like so basically it's like have a flapper party, but invite Public Enemy and the S1Ws, and then that's where we need to be.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that good?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
You're like, that's all I'm saying right now. Oh my
that's
God.
What I'm saying.
Hey, well, so before we get to our next sort of the latter half of this,
the fight conversation.
Yeah, and we're not going to go forever on this. We'll keep it to an hour, guys. The next episode we'll talk about as well. But I do want to sort of just as a sort of an interstitial, remind people that on our audio platform, Anchor.fm, you can go to the link that's on the screen now, and it's always going to be on our website and everywhere else. But if you go and click support, you can support us for 25 cents per episode. And so I'm really feeling like that's about the value that we're delivering. It's about a quarter, Joe. Like, I think that's about, like, I wouldn't feel like we cheated you, and you would not feel like you were cheated if you just handed us a quarter once a week.
Just like flipped us a quarter.
Yeah.
Once a month, right?
Yeah. And our goal, and help us reach our goal, which is to get 5 million people at the 99 cents a month level, 25 cents an episode.
That's right.
and then we'll buy an island and make it a better fight island where people actually fight on the beach.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, like not even have an octagon, just have it just be an open.
Yeah, no, that's
it's
better.
just the only rule is like no drowning.
It's going to be interesting to see. Well, that's another subject. Maybe one of these weeks coming up, we can talk about the fact that Israel Adesanya's upcoming fight is going to be in the tiny ring. That seems dangerous, and it seems to be coinciding a little too closely with the fact that he's appearing on the video game cover, which is a curse.
Man, well, I was sorry. I was distracted by the typo on the last little message we had on screen there, and I just want to go beat myself up. But listen,
yeah, typo.
Typos happen.
I didn't
Joe.
even notice it.
But Adesanya, I mean, it's one of those things where you just, man, I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope it keeps happening because it is amazing. It is amazing to watch, and he's up for it, man. He's fully up for it. He's owned the media space in a way that few can.
I saw a video of him today on Twitter. He was getting like his hair getting all. They were making his hair pink. It looked really good.
So yeah, and Nancy says that she's gonna save. She wants a spot on our island once we get that many people supporting this. But
she thinks Henderson's going to take it tomorrow, which brings us to our second half of the show.
Yes,
our last 10 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
Talk about art.
Yeah. But maybe you want to set it up a little bit. I mean, obviously, like we're talking about a fight specifically, but we don't talk about fights in the same way that every other podcast is more qualified to break down fights. We're looking at things through a perspective that is maybe a little bit more abstracted or a little bit more contemplative. We're not into like odds making. We're not into breaking down fights. If you want an actual source for fight information, go anywhere else on the internet and you will find it.
Yeah, you'll find lots of good and bad. Well, the Benson Henderson and Michael Chandler fought 4 years ago, and when they fought, it was sort of it was a great fight. It was a 5-round decision, and Michael Chandler at the time was the lightweight champion of Bellator, and it was a little bit of an oil and water situation where, Michael Chandler was an NCAA wrestler who also has, punching power. And is a relatively diverse, interesting striker who's got some grappling ability, but really, mostly Michael has a ferocious amount of focus and energy that he brings to bear in fights, and sets like wildly intense, if sometimes erratic paces throughout the fight that often overwhelm his opponents. Benson Henderson, I think, is a more well-rounded and more technical striker. Benson Henderson's a good grappler. Benson Henderson, on the other side, is a guy who has a seemingly endless gas tank and a great chin, and who has a weird ability to sort of always fight just to the edge of his opponent's ability. So Benson Henderson will go against guys who normally knock people out like crazy, and he'll almost always go the distance, and it'll be anybody's ball game. And it could be like one of the best fighters in the world or one of the worst guys in the world. Benson Henderson will be standing there at the end in anticipation of this decision, which nobody can predict because it's going to be so close. So it's a very weird matchup. But in their first fight, it played out basically that way. Chandler came out of the gate on fire and basically stunned Henderson more than once with just brutal like right hand uppercuts and hooks. Threw Benson, did a suplex on Benson Henderson that I'm surprised didn't just knock him unconscious, just landed him right on his head. Threw multiple submissions up against him, and then predictably by the second round I was sort of a little bit gassed, and it took him a minute to get recharged again, right? Which is the way with Michael Chandler, because he just goes without stopping, essentially. You know what I mean? But it usually pays off for him. It often does. He often can overwhelm his opponents in that kind of burst of energy. But by the fifth round, Benson Henderson has lasted the whole time. By the fifth round, the rhythm's off for Michael Chandler, and Benson Henderson is the one who's got the sort of bigger finish at the end. But when the smoke clears, and I think the decision is correct, Michael Chandler wins the fight. So they're going to meet again on Friday night. And, you know, the thing that I'm interested in is seeing something like that again, seeing, you know, these two guys who have these sort of weird, you know, again, sort of like dovetailing attributes and see which one ends up on the top this time. But we're also looking at guys who are 4 years older, many wars later, both of them getting, you know, up higher in age and in their careers. And you have to wonder, will we have another really dynamic, interesting, fun fight like we had the first time? Or are we going to see two guys who used to be really great, who are now both sort of not what they used to be? So I'm not sure.
Well, you know, I mean, I think they're both making arguments for this too lately. You know, I think that with any, whether it's fighting or whether it's you know, music or any kind of art, I think that you find yourself looking at something and saying, is this, you know, sort of beyond its sort of point of highest resonance? Or, you know, it's not even about accolades or success in the conventional ways, but just sort of, is it humming, right? Is this thing still kind of resonating in a way that feels present and valid? You know, like I think about, you know, sometimes when you go see an old band that you've liked for a long time or something, you know, and you know, maybe it's a band from the 70s or the 80s or whatever, 90s. When you go see them, you know, sometimes
Sticks.
Right. But you know, but like there's like a couple things that happens, right? Either way. Like one is you see it and you go, wow, you know what? Like, of course they're not made of the bombast that they were when they were whatever, jumping off of amplifiers and pyrotechnics or whatever, because they're not 21 anymore. But wow, their playing is still really powerful and refined, and you could just see the economy of movement in their playing, and you know, just what the years of repetition and doing it has sort of made them sort of whole with their sound, and they're getting more nuanced tonalities maybe out of their instrument. There's something, you know, like there's ways that I think in music people have that experience, but it can also just be like, wow, this is a hack job. These guys should just hang it up. You know, whatever. Right. So there's all the various degrees. But I think in this case with this fight, you know, they're both kind of litigating the same things. You know, it's like, you know, Chandler, I think, is kind of saying that Henderson is kind of not really putting his all into it, and not really evolving, and not pressing the issue, and not hungry, and you know, that kind of narrative. Whereas, you know, Henderson, I think, is kind of workmanlike and just sort of, yeah, I'm not trying to, you know, it's, you know, just like in the analogy of your favorite band, right? If all of a sudden your favorite guitar player is like, well, I play fiddle now. It's like, oh, that's great. You know, like you don't necessarily want to be picking up wildly different new tricks this late in your sort of career. So it's a strange prism through which to evaluate whether somebody's sort of evolving or still kind of resonating, like I was saying, or whether it's something that they're kind of falling off. But I think that this will be an interesting fight in that way, with the sort of tension, whether it's a little bit amplified or manipulated in terms of how they relate to each other and their angry sort of tonalities at points through, you know, to each other. I don't think it's really that much of a thing. I think they're trying to sell a fight.
I think you're right about that. And neither one of these guys are. It's kind of awkward in a way, because both of these guys are like very sort of good-natured people, it seems. Yeah. And when you have two guys like that, they basically both have to try to turn heel a little bit just to make it interesting, you know? Yeah, but I actually think they probably, you know, think very highly of one another, and they're just looking to do their best or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that also, you know, MMA fans have been sort of sold the narrative many times of like, it's now or never, you know, like this is Chandler's last fight on his contract, and you know, which
it actually is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, there's that kind of, you know, always that kind of, you know, two guys at sort of the same point in their career with, you know, will it be starting to be question marks after this for them in some way, or whatever, or is there some?
Die.
Yeah, and if we've ever, I mean, we're talking about, we're in a world now where Mike Tyson's taking exhibition fights in his 50s, so there's all kinds of ways that people fall off and fade, but I don't see these guys as I feel like they're both sort of very lasting physical fighters that have a way, Henderson more than Chandler though, of just not getting the worst of damage,
for sure.
I mean, obviously both can take a shot, and both have been in absolute insane fights, that the kind of fights that you don't want to show somebody when they're first becoming interested in fighting or watching fights.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the classic sort of Chandler Bellator stuff. But anyway, so I think that in this case with this fight, it's going to be, I think, if I, we don't do predictions here either, but it's hard not to sort of think that way. Mm-hmm. I appreciate Nancy saying that she believes that Henderson's going to take it. I don't know. I feel like Chandler's feeling more urgency than Henderson, and I think that that's what he's kind of speaking to. But I feel like when you're talking about people that sort of combine in the way that you're talking about, Joe, this sort of dovetailing, oil of water kind of a combination, it really does come down to just forget the technique or whatever, right? Like just who's going to will themselves and just win. I don't see a knockout. I see another decision, and I see Chandler trying to be very workmanlike about it. And I think Henderson will have his. I feel like it'll be kind of a not much different of a fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that, and I could see it being a little bit. I mean, I could see it being a little bit less interesting, just because of the fact that regardless of age, regardless of time, even that first fight, it almost seems like Chandler would have been wise to sort of have, sort of spread his energy across 5 rounds instead of, trying to just blow it out in the first round and then recoup in the second round and blow it out in the third round. You know what I mean? I feel like, he could do that again. He also might be the kind of fighter who can't help it. I mean, he really has, you see, if you follow him on Instagram, like he's insane, like you always just see him just, working out, and he's just like going for it, just like running hard, lifting hard, and jumping high, and it's just like, he just seems to be that kind of guy, you know what I mean? And you wonder if, when the time comes and they say fight, if he can do anything but that, you know what I mean? It seems to be just sort of part of who he is. And that's a great trait to have as a fighter. But, again, if you were game planning for Benson Henderson, it might be better to try to put that pace on him, but put that pace on him with a regulator. You know what I mean? Don't let Benson Henderson dictate the pace, but don't let Michael Chandler dictate the pace either, because he doesn't have a break. He doesn't know where the break is. You know what I mean? So like set Michael loose, but set him loose in a way that keeps him pushing the action forward and beating Henderson to the punch, putting Henderson on the defensive, but at the same time not wearing himself out over it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't look like Benson knows how to get tired, and it doesn't look like he knows how to get hurt. And if he's not going to get hurt and he's not going to get tired, then you just got to keep him on the back foot, and that takes a lot of energy to do over 20 minutes.
I feel like it's got to be so
25 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be really hard to fight someone like Henderson who doesn't take damage in a way that you can see.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like one of these guys that cuts real easy, like a Diaz or something. It's got to be kind of satisfying, right? Like you can just barely blow a punch by them, and like they're going to start bleeding all over the place, and it kind of feels like, oh, I'm accomplishing something.
Yeah, exactly.
But with Henderson, you're just getting pummeled, and he's fine.
Yeah, and it's also the thing too with Henderson. I think it'll be interesting too to see. They both look like they're in amazing shape, by the way, which is bodes well for the fact that the that they don't seem to be. They both seem to be taking this very seriously, and they both look great. As much as you can tell, from looking at people, but in the last fight, having watched it again, Henderson's big, man, compared to Michael, and that's another thing about it is I just think that as powerful as Chandler is, and as hard as he was hitting Henderson, I mean he was wailing on him. I mean he got a couple of great shots in that first round of their fight, and later on in the fight, there was comparatively speaking, there was no time that it looked like he was about to go out or anything like that. There was a moment where Chael Sonnen was commenting, on during the fight, and he said, he described it as, well, Benson Henderson's been hit with four, like I think he said four, fight-ending blows or something like that. He's like, if this had been anybody else in the ring right now, this fight would have been over 4 times. But it's Benson Henderson, and now we're scrambling on the ground still. You know what I mean? So he's just, that's why I think, maybe Team Chandler will remember that and say, let's not try to do that again, because we're not going to be able to do that. So if we can't do that, what's the plan going to be? And like I said, I think the plan would be, stay one step ahead of him and try to stay there for 5 rounds instead of trying to be 5 steps ahead of him in the first round and then not having the energy left for the next round. You know what I mean?
Well, you should call him up and let him know that you've got it figured out.
If anybody has connections with our buddy Michael Chandler, who actually
Nashville.
lives here in Nashville now. We are dying to have Michael Chandler on our show. We are dying to have him understand that the greatest MMA podcast in the world is right here in Nashville, and that he should be on it. I think Michael Chandler would be. I think he would dig our take on this, and I think he's a guy who would have a lot of things to say, not just about fighting, but about martial artistry and what it is to be a martial artist. And that's why we need to talk to Michael. So if anybody knows how to hook us up with Michael to get him to actually respond to us, then we'd love to hit us up on the DM.
He'll come and just strangle me and just be like, are you saying I'm like Keith Richards? Is that what you're saying?
It's going to be turned into a quick ground and pound situation.
Very, very, very much. Well, so now I suppose we should wrap it up here, but I want to sort of talk about our episode 100 and our special guests and why we're doing it and what it means. And make sure that everybody knows that we've done this for 100 episodes just to get started. That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and we're gonna do so. Episode 100 will be next Thursday, August 13th. That'll be good. I love the 13 numbers. I was born on a 13th, Brian. I consider it a lucky number. And should we tell them who the guest will be?
Yes.
So our guest next week will be our friend who is actually joining us today in the chat, Nancy Kidder, who is a professor at American University. She has a class called Writing and Fighting. She's been a guest on the show previously. Brian and I have both been, let's call it guest lecturers on some of her tele classes that we've been doing during the quarantine, where we've talked to students of hers, about various aspects of combat sports culture and things like this. Her class is basically an English class where they take combat sports culture and use it as a jumping off point for writing about culture at large, really. Our other guest is going to be a friend of Nancy's as well, who's also been on some of these same classes with us, talking to her students. A guy who you might know as the man in the hat, Chuck Liddell.
Chuck Liddell.
Chuck Mendenhall. The man in the hat, Chuck Liddell. I can't believe I just said Chuck Liddell. Chuck Mendenhall. The Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
Oh
Chuck
man.
Mindendahl will be joining us. Chuck Mindendahl, also a guest of ours, a previous guest on Art Fight podcast. And I'm anxious to talk to Chuck because I'm trying to see if some of this COVID time has given him a chance to get started on his great MMA book that we talked about when he was on the show last time.
Yeah. So I am thrilled because I love the sort of symbiosis that Nancy and Chuck have in terms of obviously the writing medium, right? And we've talked to a lot of writers, and especially in the MMA and combat sports space. So what I love though is getting people like that together, and of course you're going to talk shop, right? But you're also going to talk about all the things that are not that, and that's where you get, like, I think, the real wisdom and the insights and the fun stuff. So I think those are people who just perfectly embody the sort of spirit, I think, of why we even started this in the first place, and what are we even doing here. So we felt it would be perfect to have them, and the only other person that would be even better to have in addition to them, who was just not available, is Robin Black, who's sort of a kind of the patron saint of the Art Fight podcast. So
Robin was on our show, our 99th episode,
98,
or 98th episode.
Yeah.
And if you heard the 98th episode, Robin specifically shouted us out and asked, how come I'm not on the 100th episode? Like, what's going on, y'all? And we were like, come on, Robin, let's do it. But when we scheduled the 100th episode, Robin, unfortunately, it's unfortunate for us. It's not unfortunate for him. He's going to be off vacationing in a cottage somewhere in idyllic Canada somewhere. So we're going to have to let him go enjoy his vacation. So
yeah, all good. All good. But and if you haven't gone to see, if you follow Robin Black on Twitter, and make sure you go find his breakdown and his conversation with Michael Chandler. It's fantastic. He did a great job and really got to, I think, the more interesting parts of the kind of the narrative and the vibe of what this matchup is relative to sort of the perspective of Michael Chandler. So please check out. Go ahead.
I was going to say also the 100th episode we're doing next week. It's not going to be so much of an episode like this one. It's really going to be more of like a hang, a drink, a chat. So crack open a bottle. It's going to be happy hour time. Get in on this new chat feature that we've got here and join in with us. Some of you are going to be getting messages from us asking you to pop in the chat. We can actually pop you into the conversation on video and stuff, and pop you in and pop you out. So if you want to come and hang with the podcast, if you're a former guest or something like that, hit us up on Twitter and things, and we'll make sure to get you guys in too. Yeah,
we would have done an event in person if the world were normal, I think, to mark the occasion. And I know that, there's a lot of podcasts that have gone 100 episodes, but none of them are this one. And also,
I'll also tell you, there's been
celebrate
many
achievement
more that never get to 20, let alone 100.
But I think it's important to celebrate achievement and try to mark days that are special, or feel good, So
it's a little Christmas.
Yes, and so but we're not gonna. Since we've already had, obviously we would love to go into another deep dive with Chuck, but it's more about like, hey man, what's been going on since, a lot of things changed for you. And we'll play it real light and get him kind of like a couple of whiskeys in him or beers or whatever. And then we'll just start harassing him about, when is this book going to come out?
Yeah.
When are you doing the book? That's all we care about. So just tell us about the book. But he's such a great guy and such a kind spirit and supporter of the show. We've talked about sort of like our MMA media diet before, right? And what we like to consume, and the people that are doing the best work, a lot of them are not working right now. And, I'm sure they're in between good and then now coming up on great opportunities. But man, we've really taken a hit. So I like to bring those people in and keep them a part of at least our conversations.
For sure.
And so that's why it's so special, and that's why you should join. And whether you're a creative, whether you're a writer, whether you're a fighter, a wrestler, a coach, whether you are a art handler, whether you are a art supply salesman, whether you are a subversive art terrorist, doesn't matter. We want all of you here.
Judoka.
Judoka, that's right. So I guess we'll just wrap this up here. But I want to make sure that people know that this is happening. We were sort of half in, half out for a while because we did audio for 2 years, then did this a little bit of YouTube for the last few months, kind of in this interstitial way. But most of the audience is still just listening. Everybody, it's time to come and subscribe to the YouTube channel and do it that way. I appreciate it. And the audio will always be there. And I know it's easier, right? You can just listen to the videos that we make on YouTube, but go subscribe to the channel because the algorithm doesn't give a F about us right now. And we need your help. So
we need your help.
Yeah, it's weird to switch, midstream. It's kind of like the slaying guitar player that all of a sudden picks up fiddle. It's like, now I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's okay. I think it's good. I mean, this is like we were talking about with like releasing music under weird pseudonyms, and all of a sudden, you just fall off the face of the earth and have to start over. But it's good. And also too, like Art Fight has its own Instagram. Art Fight has its own Twitter account. So there it is up there on the screen right now. So yeah, be sure to follow all the Art Fights and to follow me and Brian as well. Send me a sweet little note and I'll follow you back.
Sweet little note. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot and gotten through our first sort of journey with our new setup, and I'm stoked. Yeah. So this has been great. Thank everybody for listening. Anything else for you, Joe?
No, if you're in Nashville, I've got a painting at Red Arrow Gallery right now in their show Breathless. So if you want to see that in real life, you can call Red Arrow and make a time to pop by there with your mask on and go see that. That's about all. I got some music. I was just on the phone with my buddy, man, talking about this music we're doing, and I'm gonna hopefully we're gonna tweak it. We got to tweak our mix, and then I'm gonna have a new single coming out soon. But I'll talk about that. Maybe by episode 100, I'll have something more to say about that.
Awesome. Well, make sure that you second guess it a lot to the point of making yourself crazy, because that's what
second guessed it was.
Yeah, there's always a point with the music mix where you're like, actually, I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I did listen to it about 25 times, like in my earbuds, on my headphones, in my car, upstairs on the radio. And then I was finally like, no, I just think we got to turn this down a little bit and just bump that just a touch. But anyway, so then I also told my buddy Andrew Atkins, who's also a great singer-songwriter. I was talking to him earlier today, and I was also like, if you think I'm insane, like, feel free to just push back on this and just tell me that you don't want to do it. But he's like, no, I'll listen to it. I'll check it out. So anyway, but we'll get done with that soon. But this is actually the fun part of making music to me is the once it's all essentially done and you're just trying to arrange the plate. It's such a joy.
It's satisfying. It's like the decorating, not putting up columns and pillars everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. I can't wait to hear that. And I'm sure you'll let us know that you'll get it done in lightning speed efficiency.
Yeah. What about you? What else you got going
on? So I've got just a couple of like kind of client projects that are sort of drone projects that I'm working on right now that are nothing fun, but
good to have work though.
Good to have work and good sized projects that I'm happy with. And then so I've been doing that, but I've also been doing a lot of just organizing and just getting everything so dialed in because there's just another wave coming. You can kind of tell, right? With your work, you can just kind of, it's like, man, I better get some stuff ready. So I've just been getting everything super organized and kind of preparing. And then other than that, I've got I guess it'll be in about a week or two or something. Going to go down to Greenville, South Carolina, and film my friend muralist Guido Van Helten. He's doing a massive brutalist architecture building in the middle of Greenville right now with this really beautiful 150-foot mural of that's kind of highlighting the end of segregation in public schools there. And I don't know, it's a cool project, massive piece of work he's doing. And so I'm going to go down and do all the documentation for that and make a little film and all that. So that's that. That'll be coming. But and then there's plenty of other things music wise, but yeah, I mean, like we all are, man. Everybody's just hustling. Everybody's finding new things to do or old things to do, or it's been really exciting to see everybody staying with it in all of the things, and just sort of in the face of uncertainty. I don't know why not barrel into something else. So just because we talked about topical art and maybe threw a little bit of shade at it in a lot of ways, don't be afraid of it, and don't let our idiot opinions of things stop you from doing something.
Yeah, if you're trying to do anything right now, that's very positive.
Just purely as therapy is fully valid. But anyway, so again, episode 100, a week from today. Everybody get in there. It'll be Chuck Mendenhall and Nancy Kidder. So it'll be sort of a
Chuck Liddell. He'll be 101.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. So we are out. Joe, you good?
Yeah. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right. Yes. Thanks, everybody.